while my relatives clinked glasses over their millions at my grandfather's funeral. I stood in the corner, holding a crumpled envelope with a single plane ticket inside. They laughed in my face that day. 6 months later, those same people were knocking on my door, desperate for my mercy. My name is Sofia Mercer, and this is the story of how humiliation turned into the greatest inheritance I never saw coming. But before we get to the twist that shattered everything they thought they knew, let me show you the stage my grandfather set, the players in a game he designed long before he died. There was Adrian, my older cousin, rehearsing his CEO voice in a $6,000 Brioni suit, as if the title had already been engraved on his business card. His sister, Celine, hid her grin behind oversized Chanel shades, likely scrolling through filters in her mind for the yacht she was already picturing. Their parents, Martin and Claudia, hovered over the lawyer's folder like hawks circling fresh prey. And then there was me, the underpaid high school history teacher who drove 3 hours in a Honda Civic with failing brakes, just to say goodbye to the only man in this family who ever treated me like I mattered. Grandfather Leonard Mercer had built an empire out of seawater and sweat, turning one fishing boat into Mercer Shipping Industries. Everyone in that room was drooling for a piece of his kingdom. Everyone except me. All I wanted was 5 more minutes to play chess with the old man, who taught me that the most powerful moves are always the ones your opponent never sees coming. I drove 3 hours in a Honda Civic with failing brakes to attend that funeral, while Adrian rehearsed his CEO voice in a $6,000 suit, and Celine scrolled yacht filters behind her Chanel shades. They measured life in stock portfolios and penthouses. I measured mine in overdue bills and lesson plans. Different worlds, but the same blood. That funeral wasn't just a farewell. It was the day I learned that the smallest gift can hide the biggest secret, and the people laughing at you might already be standing on a trapdoor they don't know exists. At 5:30 every weekday, my alarm dragged me out of bed, same as it had for 6 years of teaching at Roosevelt High in Detroit. The water stain on my ceiling had become a map of Texas I could trace in the dark. The neighbor's dog barked on schedule. Mrs. Lynn practiced her Tai Chi through the paper-thin walls, and my life, predictable and modest, couldn't have been further from the velvet world I was born into. Being a Mercer still carried weight in certain circles. My father, David Mercer, was the only one who understood why I walked away from the family empire. He dropped dead at his desk when I was 15, heart attack, after another all-nighter cleaning up the mistakes Martin had made. I remember his last words to me as clearly as if he'd whispered them yesterday. Don't let them turn you into something you're not. 3 hours later, he was gone, and my mother was left holding the wreckage. Evelyn patched us together with 12-hour nursing shifts at Detroit General, while the rest of the family lived behind gates and champagne. She never spoke a bitter word about Martin, but the look she gave him at Dad's funeral said everything. Silence can cut sharper than accusation. And then there was Leonard Mercer himself, an enigma in a 3-piece suit. He started Mercer Shipping with his Navy discharge pay after the war, building a fleet and an empire brick by brick. By the time I was born, his reach stretched across oceans, yet the man himself remained unreadable, a grandmaster always thinking 10 moves ahead. By the time I was born, my grandfather owned a fleet of cargo ships, warehouses in a dozen cities, and enough money to buy anything he desired. But here's what set Leonard Mercer apart. He didn't believe in giving, he believed in earning. Every birthday card came with a crisp $20 bill and a note that read, "Make it worth more." Every Christmas gift was practical, a ledger, a book on business strategy, or a certificate for some accounting course. The only time he seemed genuinely interested in me was during our Sunday chess games. It started when I was 10, right after I'd won my school's tournament. He appeared at our apartment one morning, set up a board, and said, "Show me what you've got." I lost in 12 moves, but he came back the next week and the week after until those games became the one steady thread between us. Once, after another loss, he leaned back and said, "You play like your father, too protective of your pieces, not focused enough on winning." I told him maybe I didn't want to sacrifice everything just to win. For the first time, he smiled, really smiled. "Maybe that's why you're the only one who still interests me, Sophia." Adrian and Celine never understood those games. Adrian was too busy shadowing my grandfather at the office, armed with his MBA from Wharton, grandfather's alma mater, which he mentioned at every possible opportunity. Every family dinner became one of Adrian's personal TED Talks, filled with buzzwords about optimization and acquisitions. Celine chose a different stage, social media. 200,000 followers watched her drape herself over yachts in designer gowns at European ports. She called it building a platform. I called it spending my grandfather's money while she waited for more. Her crowning achievements were a blue check mark and a Swiss banker boyfriend with a vineyard. Martin and Claudia, their parents, were the so-called power couple of the family, though it was power in name only. Martin wore the title of CFO at Mercer Shipping, though his assistant carried the real weight. Claudia floated through charity galas, not for causes but for cameras, her face polished into the society pages. Their mansion was so sprawling they needed an intercom just to talk to each other. And then there was me, teaching 43 teenagers about the Constitution, grading papers at a wobbly kitchen table I bought at a garage sale, and somehow feeling more fulfilled than any of them could imagine. That was my world before the funeral, before the envelope, before the game shifted. I thought I knew who I was. I thought I knew the board I was playing on. But the truth? I'd been staring at the wrong pieces all along. The Rochester Country Club had never felt more suffocating than it did that October afternoon. My grandfather had demanded his will be read there, in the oak-paneled room where he once carved million-dollar deals over cigars and brandy. The polished mahogany table reflected our faces like a warning, and I caught Adrian adjusting his Rolex for the third time in 5 minutes. We'd just trudged in from the cemetery where autumn rain had turned the burial into a muddy mess that Claudia complained about the entire ride over. "Before we begin," said Mr. Harridan, the family attorney, as he straightened his wire-rimmed glasses, "I want you to know Leonard was very precise about these arrangements. He reviewed this will only a week before his passing." Martin leaned forward, his fists clenched with anticipation. "We understand, Harridan. Leonard discussed the succession plan with me extensively. It was a lie, and we all knew it. My grandfather never shared his plans outside the office, and he certainly never promised Martin anything. But Martin had been bragging for months that he was about to take the reins as CEO, with Adrian at his side, and that the Mercer legacy was secured. Let's proceed then." Harridan opened a leather-bound folder, the sound echoing in the heavy silence. "To my eldest son, Martin Mercer, and his wife, Claudia, I leave the estate in the Hamptons and the investment portfolio contained in account ending 471. Claudia's jeweled hand clutched Martin's arm. Her diamond bracelet threw sparks across the table. The Hampton house. Oh, Martin, he remembered. Harridan didn't pause. To my grandson, Adrian Mercer, I leave Mercer Shipping Industries and all its operational assets, with the condition that he maintains current employment levels for at least 1 year. Adrian shot to his feet so fast his chair scraped the polished floor. I knew it. Grandfather, I won't let you down. His phone was already in his hand, likely drafting his announcement to the world. Adrian Mercer, CEO. Harridan cleared his throat and continued. To my granddaughter, Celine Mercer, I leave the Manhattan penthouse on Central Park West and the yacht, Serafina, currently moored in Newport. Celine's squeal could have shattered glass. The penthouse? Oh my God, do you know what that's worth? And the yacht? My followers are going to lose their minds. Then Harridan turned to me. His expression softened, almost apologetic. And to my granddaughter, Sofia Mercer. He reached into the folder and pulled out a small white envelope, worn at the corners, my name written in my grandfather's shaky handwriting. The room froze for 2 seconds. Then Adrian broke into laughter. You've got to be kidding me. An envelope? That's it? I took it with steady hands, though my heart thundered in my chest. The paper was thin, fragile. Inside, a single plane ticket. Rome, 1 way. Departing in 48 hours. I slid the ticket back into the envelope, but something caught my eye. Tiny numbers in the corner. 1947. Grandfather's Navy year. Why mark that here? Adrian snatched it before I could react. Coach, this is priceless. The teacher gets a vacation. Celine had her phone out, already filming. Sophia, your face right now. This is too good. Don't worry. Maybe he left you. Some frequent flyer miles, too. Martin rose, straightening his tie like a king who had just claimed his crown. Your grandfather always said you lacked the instinct for business, Sophia. At least he gave you something pleasant. Rome is lovely this time of year. Claudia's voice dripped with fake sympathy. A little trip to help you process things. How thoughtful of him. My mother finally spoke from the corner, her voice firm. Is that everything, Mr. Harridan? That concludes the distribution of assets, he said, closing the folder. Though there is a personal letter for Sophia, to be opened only upon her arrival in Rome. Adrian nearly fell out of his chair laughing. A letter? What's it going to say? Sorry you're broke. Enjoy the pizza. Enough, Martin barked, though the smirk on his face betrayed him. Sophia made her choice. She wanted to be a teacher. This is her reward. I stared at the ticket again. October 15th, 3 p.m. Alitalia Flight 61. Why so specific? Why Rome? My grandfather had spoken of Shanghai, London, Hamburg, but never once Rome. Well, I said, sliding the ticket back into the envelope. I guess I'd better pack. Celine blinked, genuinely shocked. You're actually going to use your sick days on some random trip to Rome? My grandfather gave me a ticket, I told them, meeting each of their eyes. The least I can do is use it. Martin shook his head. Sentimental fool, just like your father. Dennis never understood that emotion has no place in business either. And that was the moment I knew I was getting on that plane. Because Martin was wrong about my father, wrong about me, and maybe, just maybe, wrong about what my grandfather had really left behind. The ticket weighed almost nothing in my pocket, but it felt heavier than all the millions they'd just inherited. As I walked out of that country club, their laughter echoing after me, I heard my grandfather's final words from our last chess game. "The best moves, Sophia, are the ones your opponent never sees coming." The rain had stopped, and for the first time that day, the sun broke through the clouds. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the ticket while my laptop screen glowed with my bank balance. $1,847.23. Rent was due in 5 days. My car needed new brake pads. I had 43 essays on the Civil War waiting to be graded. Every rational bone in my body screamed that flying to Rome was insane. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the ticket. Rent was due, my car was one pothole away from death, and every rational bone in my body told me Rome was madness. Then I saw it again, a faint number in the corner of the envelope, 1947. The year grandfather left the Navy. The year my mother once called the start of his secrets. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew one thing. I had to get on that plane. 2 days later, I boarded Alitalia Flight 61 with a single carry-on and $1,847.23 to my name. No plan, no hotel, just a question written in my grandfather's hand. Detroit vanished beneath the clouds, and for the first time since the funeral, I felt the board shifting beneath my feet. But then I saw my grandfather's face in my memory, softer, different, almost human, during our last chess match just 2 weeks before he died. "Sophia," he'd said, moving his knight in a way I didn't recognize. "What do you know about trust?" "It's earned, not given," I answered automatically, the lesson he'd drilled into all of us. He shook his head. "No, girl. Real trust is knowing when to follow, even when you don't understand why. Your father knew that once. He trusted me with something precious, and I failed him. But you're different. You don't want anything from me." "I never have, grandfather." "I know. That's why when the time comes, you'll trust me, even when everyone else thinks you're a fool." And now, holding that ticket, I realized the time had come. Holding that ticket, my grandfather's words no longer felt like a memory. They felt like instructions. I picked up the phone and called my mother. "I'm going," I said, before she could even say hello. "I knew you would," Evelyn answered without hesitation. "Your grandfather called me last month. He didn't explain, just told me to support whatever decision you made after the funeral." "Mom, this is insane. I can't afford to miss work. I have responsibilities." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Sophia, your father once told me Leonard wasn't always the man we knew. He said there was a before and an after in his father's life, and we only knew the after. Maybe this is about the before." The next morning, I walked into Roosevelt High to arrange a substitute. My principal wasn't thrilled. 6 years, not a single sick day, and suddenly I was asking for 3. She approved it reluctantly. 3 days. 3 days to cross an ocean and figure out what game my grandfather was still playing from the grave. "Miss Mercer, you okay?" Jasmine, one of my sharpest students, caught me after class. "You seem different today." I smiled faintly. "Just thinking about history, Jasmine, how the most important moments don't look important when they're happening." I packed light, 1 carry-on with 2 changes of clothes and my father's worn leather journal that had never left my side since his funeral. The Uber to Detroit Metro cost $32 I couldn't spare, but I was already committed to the madness. Boarding was called, and I joined the line behind a family bickering over seats. the mother juggling two kids while the father scrolled his phone, oblivious. Ordinary problems, ordinary lives. Meanwhile, I was about to follow the trail of a dead man into a mystery half a world away. Seat 32B middle, in the back. Adrian had been right about one thing. It was Coach. To my left, a man already snoring. To my right, a woman, guarding both armrests while watching a movie, on her iPad with no headphones. As the plane lifted, Detroit shrank below. I pictured Adrian swaggering through grandfather's office like he owned it. Celine posing on the yacht. Martin and Claudia meeting financial advisors about their newfound wealth. And me, cramped in coach, broke, flying toward a secret with no map. But for the first time since the funeral, it felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. The flight attendant offered drinks. "Just water," I said. As I twisted the cap, another chess memory surfaced. The day my grandfather sacrificed his queen to win. I'd been stunned. Why give up the strongest piece? "Power isn't what you hold," he'd told me. "It's what you're willing to lose to gain something better." Most people never see past the loss. That's why they never win. The plane banked east into the night. My cousins thought they'd won everything that mattered, but I knew the real game had just begun, and I was the only piece he'd placed to play it. Hours later, wheels hit the tarmac at Fiumicino Airport, 3:07 p.m. My legs cramped, my back aching, exhaustion clinging to me like a second skin. Italian and English announcements blurred together as we taxied. Suddenly, the reality hit. I was in Rome. No hotel, no plan, no idea what to do next. Immigration was a blur of stamps and questions. "Purpose of visit?" the officer asked in accented English. "I honestly don't know," I said, too tired to invent a lie. He gave me a strange look, then stamped my passport. "Welcome to Italy." The arrivals hall was chaos. Tourists fumbling maps, families hugging, chauffeurs waving signs. I was about to walk past when I froze. A man in a black suit stood holding a polished sign, Sofia Mercer. My heart stopped. I stepped forward. "I'm Sofia Mercer." Relief flooded his face. "Mr. Mercer, finally. Please, come quickly." His English was clear, though accented. "My name is Lorenzo. Your grandfather arranged everything months ago." "Who sent you?" I asked, my voice dry. "Your grandfather," he said simply. "Please, we have a long drive." He took my bag before I could answer and led me outside to a black Mercedes that probably cost more than 2 years of my salary. And just like that, I wasn't walking into Rome. I was being driven straight into my grandfather's secret. The October air in Italy wrapped around me like warm silk, nothing like the gray chill I'd left behind in Detroit. Lorenzo opened the rear door, and I slid onto leather seats soft enough to swallow me whole. "Where are we going?" I asked as the car pulled from the curb. "Montouri Estate," he said, 1 hour north in the Sabine Hills. I frowned. My grandfather never mentioned any estate in Italy. Our eyes met briefly in the rearview mirror. Mr. Leonard owned the estate for 45 years. He came every September, 1 week, always alone. 45 years. That would mean since 1980, before I was even born. The math didn't make sense. Nothing did. Rome's sprawl fell away behind us, replaced by rolling hills stitched with olive groves and vineyards. The landscape was almost painfully beautiful, like a movie still about someone finding themselves in Italy. Lorenzo drove with the easy recklessness of someone who'd done it 1,000 times, and I found myself gripping the door handle at every sharp curve. How did you know my grandfather? I asked. My father was his driver first. When Papa died, I took over. 20 years now, every September. Mr. Leonard never missed a visit. 20 years of secret trips. 20 years of a life none of us knew existed. What else had he been hiding? The road narrowed, winding through a stone village where old men sat outside cafes, watching us pass like characters in an old Italian film. Lorenzo turned onto a private lane lined with cypress trees. At the end, iron gates swung open automatically. The villa beyond took my breath away. 3 stories of honey-colored stone, terraces spilling over with flowers, endless vineyards stretching to the horizon. Gardens so perfect they belonged in a Renaissance painting. Lorenzo parked before massive wooden doors, older than anything I'd ever touched. Before I could process the scene, the doors opened and an elderly woman emerged. She was elegant in a way money can't fake, silver hair in a simple bun, eyes the same steel gray as my grandfather's. Tears slid down her face as she walked toward me. Sophia, Lorenzo said softly, meet your grandmother, Isabella Mercer. The world tilted. My hand shot out to steady myself on the car door. That's impossible. My grandmother died before I was born. She reached me, took my hands in hers, and gripped them with surprising strength. Your American grandmother did die, Caro, but I am very much alive. Her accent was musical, her English perfect but formal. She studied my face, as if committing it to memory. You have his eyes, she whispered, but your father's gentle spirit. Come inside, Sophia. There's so much to tell you. The villa's interior was understated elegance, nothing like the gaudy mansion Martin and Claudia had built back in the States. Isabella led me to a sitting room where every wall told a story in photographs. My grandfather, young and laughing, stood before a small church, a wedding photo. Leonard and Isabella, barely in their 20s, radiant. We married in 1947, she said, watching me absorb it all. Leonard came to Italy with the Navy, stayed after the war to help with reconstruction. We met at a dance in Rome. He was so handsome, so full of dreams. We started with nothing, just a few acres of vines a friend sold us for almost nothing. She poured 2 glasses of wine from a crystal decanter. This is from our vineyard. Heredità. We call it inheritance. The wine was extraordinary, rich, layered, alive. I don't understand, I murmured. Your grandfather had a whole life here, she said softly. More than a life. He had a family, me, our son, Augusto, the grandchildren he never met, because he chose America instead. He left you. The Korean War started. Leonard felt duty calling. He was supposed to be gone 6 months. Her voice carried no bitterness, only sadness. But he met your American grandmother while on leave. She was pregnant with Martin. An honorable man would have divorced me, but Leonard couldn't give up either life. So he kept both, separate, secret. My hands were shaking. He lived a complete lie. No, Isabella, her eyes locked on mine. He lived 2 truths. He loved us both in different ways. The vineyard grew, became successful. He sent money, visited every year, but he couldn't choose. Until now. She walked to an antique desk and pulled out a thick folder. Mercer Vineyards International, $47 million in assets. It's all yours, Sophia. Not Martin, not Adrian, you. The documents in her hands overwhelmed me. Deeds, contracts, bank statements. Proof that my grandfather had built an entirely separate empire on this side of the Atlantic. But what struck me hardest wasn't the paper. It was the old laptop she opened and the video she queued up. His face filled the screen. For the first time ever, my grandfather looked at peace. "Sophia," he said, "if you're watching this, then you trusted me enough to take the flight. Good. You always were the only one who understood that some things matter more than money. Your cousins got what they always wanted, the appearance of success, but appearances." He leaned closer to the camera. "Appearances can be deceiving." Mercer Shipping has been bleeding money for 3 years. My grandfather's recorded voice continued. "I buried it in the books, but Adrian is about to inherit a disaster. The Manhattan penthouse, 3 mortgages. The yacht, leased. The Hampton estate. The bank owns 70%. I gave them exactly what they showed me. They worshipped hollow prizes, shiny on the surface, rotten underneath." He leaned closer to the camera, his eyes sharp again. "But you, Sophia, you came every Sunday just to play chess. You never asked for anything. You never angled for position. You chose teaching over money because you wanted purpose. So I'm giving you what you never asked for. Truth, family, and yes, wealth that's real." The screen flickered as he listed it out. The vineyard produces 2 million bottles a year. The villa has been in Isabella's family for 3 centuries. Your uncle, Augusto, has been running the operations, waiting to meet you. Your cousins, Marco and Elena, good people, raised right. Nothing like Adrian and Selene. This is your real inheritance. A family that values work. Land that produces something real. A legacy built on truth, not lies. He paused, and that familiar razor-edged look returned. "And Sophia, your next move is yours. But here's my advice. Adrian will call within a month, begging for help. Be kinder to him than he was to you. That's what makes you better. Checkmate, my girl." The screen went dark. Isabella laid a hand on my shoulder. "He spoke of you constantly," she said softly. "Every visit. Stories about his granddaughter, the teacher who chose meaning over money. I spent 3 weeks in Italy, learning everything. Uncle Augusto looked so much like my father, it hurt. He ran the vineyard with quiet dignity, never bitter about being the hidden son. Marco and Elena welcomed me like a brother returned from war. They taught me about the soil, the vines, and the grandfather they knew, a lighter man. Elena told me once, as we walked the rows of grapes, here he laughed. He worked with his hands, not the businessman you knew. She was right. My grandfather had lived 2 lives, and for the first time, I was beginning to understand both. The call from Adrian came exactly 23 days later. I was back in Detroit, teaching my classes, when the phone rang at midnight. "Sophia, we need to talk." His voice was stripped bare of arrogance. "The company's bankrupt," he admitted. "The accountants found everything. Dad lost the house. Celine's penthouse got foreclosed yesterday. It's all gone." "I'm sorry, Adrian," I said. "No, you're not," he replied, after a long pause. "And you shouldn't be. We were awful to you." His voice cracked. "Grandfather left you something real, didn't he?" "Yes," I said. "Good. You deserve it. You were the only one who actually loved him." The next day, I made Adrian an offer. Manage U.S. distribution for Eredita wines. Salary, not ownership. He accepted instantly. Celine took longer to bend, but she did. Turns out she had a talent for marketing. When she was promoting something real instead of herself. She lives in Rome now, engaged to Lorenzo's son, learning the business from the ground up. Martin and Claudia moved into a cramped apartment in New Jersey. Martin works as a bookkeeper. Claudia took a job at Nordstrom. They don't speak to me anymore, but Adrian says they're oddly happier, forced to rely on each other instead of their fortune. My mother moved into the guest house of the California Vineyard estate I bought with my first distribution payment. She retired from nursing and paints every day now, something she always wanted but never had time for. And me, I still teach, only part-time. Summers now belong to Italy, walking the vines at dawn, learning the rhythms of soil and harvest, and building bonds with a family I never knew I had. My students back in Detroit still laugh that their history teacher owns a vineyard, but I found ways to turn it into a lesson. International trade, agriculture, legacy, it all connects. One evening at the villa, I sat across the chessboard from Uncle Augusto. He studied the pieces, then said quietly, "Your grandfather always believed the winner wasn't the one who took the most pieces, but the one who knew which pieces really mattered." I looked at the board, then at the vineyards stretching beyond the window, then at the photograph of my grandfather in 1947, young, full of hope. "He won," I whispered. "It just took 60 years for the game to end." Augusto shook his head, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "No, Sophia, you won. You just didn't know you were playing." That envelope everyone laughed at. It wasn't just a plane ticket. It was a key, a doorway, into the hidden game my grandfather had been playing his whole life. My cousins inherited illusions. I inherited the truth. They got what they thought they wanted. I received what I didn't even know I needed: family, roots, and a legacy built on something real. In my Detroit apartment, one bottle still waits untouched, the last my grandfather ever made. Eredita 2024, the label says, and beneath it, in his handwriting, for Sofia, who understood that the best inheritance isn't what you're given, but what you're trusted to continue. Every Sunday, I still play chess, sometimes with Augusto, sometimes with my students, sometimes alone, hearing echoes of the old man across the years. Because what he left me wasn't money, or land, or even the vineyard. What he left me was a truth I can't ignore. The board everyone else was watching, that was never the real game. And somewhere, I can't shake the feeling. There are still moves left to play.